Good afternoon to all our viewers listening in and all those going to listen in after this live session is recorded. Four hurdles to overcoming and, securing your infrastructure with SD-WAN. I'm really excited today. Lee Dolson is joining us. He's the chief architect from Zscaler or Zscaler, depends on the country you live in. Lee, before I let you introduce yourself, absolutely, Zscaler is a really interesting technology. I've known them for many years now, and the discussions we're going to have are going to be technical, so enjoy this. Ask any questions. Remember, no question is wrong. We will try to answer all the questions. Do leave us feedback, and also you can obviously get in touch with Lee and or myself. My name is Amar Singh. I am from Cyber Management Alliance, and you can ask questions after the webinar. Lee, over to you to introduce and start moving on with this interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Amar. Yes, so my name is Lee Dolson. I'm the chief architect for Zscaler's Asia Pacific and Japan business. Been with Zscaler now for 8 years. It's been very exciting watching the market grow and mature in its adoption of cloud technologies. So today we're talking, more on SD-WAN, and cloud is driving a lot of these SD-WAN discussions, and you see here on this slide just a few different surveys provided by different organizations, and you see that the vast majority of organizations are actively deploying SD-WAN or planning to deploy it. There's investigations underway, there's active rollouts, and there's a lot of benefits around adopting SD-WAN. I mean, one of the big benefits is just the ability to create more breakouts, faster access to cloud, and offset a lot of the MPLS costs. That in turn improves user productivity. There's opportunities to simplify the on-premise infrastructure. Instead of running lots of different appliances at every internet breakout, you can move this to a very simplified cloud managed and orchestrated network fabric. But that brings challenges as well, and that's some of what we're going to talk about today. So how do you do network security in this new world of cloud? Because the diagram you see here is really what, as a collective industry, all of us have been building for the last 20 years, where it's this very, this concept of a castle and a moat. Your users and your applications are inside the castle. You build this hard security perimeter around the castle. When users are inside, they have trusted access to the apps. When they go and leave the castle, they're going through all of your security infrastructure, or if they're outside, coming in. But as you begin to adopt cloud applications, what you're doing is you're taking all of the applications that we're running inside and on-premise, you're actually moving those to other people's networks. And so while your own network doesn't necessarily go away, the value of backhauling stuff to distributed breakouts, a handful of breakouts, really doesn't make sense. And then how do you do security when these are cloud applications? Yes, users can access these applications from your network, where you have an opportunity to secure that in a number of ways, but users can also access these applications from any network. And again, you don't control the security of the networks where those SaaS applications live. So this really is driving new ways of thinking about how security is done. And while SD-WAN has a significant part to play in this whole story, there's a number of challenges. And so that's what we're going to really cover today, is each of these challenges. So one is, SD-WAN does have security, and at least the majority of SD-WAN solutions, there's some built-in security on that device. And so that can, set some perceptions that maybe that's good enough, that you'll have the security taken care of there in your SD-WAN device. But that's really not going to cut it all by itself. There is some value for that security, so there's definitely some benefits around running security on your SD-WAN device. But in many cases, it's a very simple firewall. I mean, there's various levels of visibility and control, but in many cases, it's a pretty straightforward stateful firewall. So if you are looking at defense in depth and traditional, two-tier firewall approaches, the firewall in an SD-WAN device certainly has a role that it can play. in that traditional two-tier architecture. But it's also got a lot of blind spots. These SD-WAN devices are, they're often branch office form factors. There's minimal processing capability available in many of these form factors. Even if we were to beef it up, there's still a limit to how much processing and security you can put. At the end of the day, the focus of these devices is really cloud orchestrated network fabric. And a lot of the security, if it's there, is not the core focus of what these devices are doing. So you're missing a lot of things that are expected in a traditional comprehensive security stack. You're often missing comprehensive NGFW DPI type of signatures. You're missing IPS, sandboxing, DLP, lots of different kinds of security that people are looking for. Don't work directly on an SD-WAN device.
Lee, can I interrupt you? When we talk to clients, part of the challenge is a lot of clients, rightly or wrongly, in my opinion, wrongly, hopefully you agree, they assume SD-WAN is a bolt-on, right, to their existing investment in traditional firewalls, and it will help them save money. I think, do you see that also? Because that's the only, predominantly many clients, even in the UK, where we are based, also see SD-WAN as a consolidation exercise.
Yeah, so there's two ways to view SD-WAN, and you're not necessarily getting all of the value out of SD-WAN as a bolt-on. I mean, some people are looking at SD-WAN as an opportunity to replace, very expensive MPLS with encrypted backhaul using SD-WAN instead. But then you're still, if it's a bolt-on, that means you do have to backhaul it back to where you have your traditional security investment, where your actual internet gateway is. So you've invested in SD-WAN, but you're not getting one of the biggest benefits SD-WAN can bring to the table, which is the ability to break out directly. If you do break out directly, though, that's no longer a bolt-on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sorry.
So, no problem. Please. Any questions are good. So, and this is a very relevant one. So, yeah, if you want to take advantage of the biggest advantage of SD-WAN to give you that performance is that direct breakout, and then that becomes not a bolt-on. It's something different. And so, if you want to continue to make it a bolt-on, then that requires investing in the same security technology you have in your gateways, and so that's a challenge. So things to look for when you're looking for, what's the way I can use SD-WAN to get the best out of it, but what's a solution, a bigger picture solution I need to solve this problem. So you want a security solution that, in addition to the SD-WAN, can provide you the application protocol, full context awareness, who is the user, where is the user coming from, all these sorts of controls. And one of the really key ones, though, because again, cloud is driving this. And so it's not just about securing the traffic that's coming from this SD-WAN device or coming from your network, but what about the users that leave your network? You want a security solution that works at the endpoint. In some senses, you want SD-WAN all the way to the endpoint that's giving you a single comprehensive security solution. And finally, it's got to be able to make decisions based on content, the actual payloads that users are attempting to upload or download, what's being delivered to the user. Making destination-based decisions, which is what a lot of SD-WAN devices are limited to, is just not sufficient to provide real security. It's destination-based decisions are good for traffic routing, which was one of the values SD-WAN can add, but for security, you want to make content-based decisions all the time. So the second hurdle, and this goes to your bolt-on discussion, Amar. The second hurdle is the traditional security solutions are up to the task. So your apps have moved to the cloud, and if you're taking advantage of getting the users the best access to the cloud, you want to take advantage of the SD-WAN approach and enable not SD-WAN for a cheaper backhaul, but SD-WAN for faster performance, because you can break users out to the cloud immediately. And so, like we talked about with your bolt-on discussion, if SD-WAN is a bolt-on and you want to replicate your security at every SD-WAN breakout, that's actually not just the SD-WAN device that you need now. Now you need to acquire whatever the other types of security technologies you have in your existing gateway. And so then you've got more appliances that you've got to deploy out of these remote branches where you have SD-WAN. And that's highly inefficient, that's highly costly. You know, doing it in a virtualized form factor is just, you know, slightly moving the problem to a virtual form factor, but all the core management problems of multiple appliances and GUIs and all those things are there. So virtualization does not equal cloud, even if you can run the virtual things up somewhere like AWS or Azure. And just the security, the way we see security working today, the destinations are highly dynamic. We see, you know, most content, you know, is delivered via CDNs. The various cloud vendors are storing their content within CDNs or building out CDNs. Those CDNs are then available for various enterprises, good actors and bad actors. And increasingly, we see most of the threats actually coming through CDNs because the bad actors can leverage those just as easily as the good guys. So you've got to, you know, the destinations themselves are these CDNs and many other things that are dynamic entities that simple destination-based blocking is not really going to cut it. So, you know, what's the best way? What do you need to look for to add the security to allow these direct breakouts for SD-WAN, but without adding that complexity of trying to replicate the traditional security that's sitting there in your gateways today? And so, what you need to look for is a few different things. So you need something that is actually delivering the security in the cloud as a comprehensive cloud-delivered security stack. So as a cloud service means you're subscribing, you know, on a user-based model or a very simple model where you don't have to worry about capacity planning. You don't have to worry about managing individual virtual boxes or anything like that. You want something that has the ability to look at all traffic, in particular SSL traffic, and we're going to focus a little more on SSL coming up. But it's a very important one that you can look at all ports and protocols as well as encrypted traffic to ensure that you can deliver the proper levels of security. And it's got to be able to, you know, give the same level of protection no matter where your users are. So you don't want a situation where you tell executives, well, I've got really heavy investment in our corporate office in security, but yeah, when I go out to a remote site or when I leave, there's differing levels of security depending on where you are physically. So you want to look at strategies that can give you a consistent level of security no matter what location a user is coming from. So I mentioned SSL in the previous slide, and it's a really important topic that we need to talk about. You know, this is a stat, around 93% of the traffic across Google is actually encrypted. And we've seen, it's not just Google, it's across the industry. We've seen a really rapid adoption of encryption. Google is definitely one of the players that's helping push the industry to move towards full encryption. You know, part of this is on the back of the Snowden revelations many years ago now. But ever since those revelations, we've seen a really aggressive shift in the market to adopt encryption end-to-end for all traffic. And so I think for customers in the Zscaler cloud, we're seeing the majority of customers are roughly in the 80th percentile of their traffic, around 80+% of their traffic is encrypted, not just the Google traffic, but all internet traffic leaving their networks is encrypted traffic.
Lee, sorry to interrupt you, and this is really important. I think we discussed this beforehand briefly. I think it's a challenge, isn't it? Because encryption is absolutely important, but it is also an imperative for the organization to be able to see certain type of traffic to protect the business, right?
Absolutely.
It's not an easy balance. What is Zscaler's view on this? I mean, I know we're going to talk about decrypting in a second, but in terms of actual performance, part of the reason historically was always an SSL proxy was quite costly, not only in money, but in terms of performance. But you guys absolutely, as I understand, have kept this at the core of your strategy.
Yeah, so part of our cloud, which we'll get into our cloud itself in a little bit later, but that is a key part of our own design decisions, was building a solution that can cater to SSL. From day one, can handle all encrypted traffic all the time. But why do you need to do it? You're absolutely right. It's very critical to do it. So there's definitely a bit of push and pull in terms of the media's perspective on privacy, which is valid. There's nothing invalid about privacy. So a solution needs to allow enterprises to respect privacy. And as a cloud vendor, Zscaler needs to respect the privacy and make sure the right controls are in place, that privacy is not being disrespected. But at the same time, these are users using your network, using your endpoints, using your applications. They also have access to other applications. So it's actually twofold. One is you just got, wittingly or unwittingly, this is where CASB comes into play. Users can upload content to, millions of destinations on the internet. And, some of those places are shadow IT things that are actually adopted by portions of the business that users absolutely should be able to upload content to. Other things are channels where data may be lost. Again, maybe not through users intentionally trying to leak data, but data may be going out via channels that companies are unaware of. But without the ability to look inside of the SSL traffic, you're not able to control what channels data is allowed to go out and what channels are essentially read-only. So you also need to be able to not block SSL encrypted websites. So, Dropbox is a great example. It's not one of the biggest enterprise apps, but certainly some enterprises use it. Other enterprises will be using Office 365 and OneDrive. Doesn't mean you can block Dropbox, because even though your employees shouldn't be uploading to Dropbox, your business partners may be uploading files to Dropbox that your employees need to be able to download. So you need to be able to do SSL inspection to be able to do this granularity. But the other piece is the attack surface. The bad guys, like I mentioned with CDNs and all of these things, the bad guys are getting a bit of a free ride with this migration to SSL. And we see the vast majority of the threats that we block are delivered over 50 channels. They are delivering these, it's not even that much work to do encryption these days. There's very easy ways to encrypt any content using certificates with services like Let's Encrypt. You can host your content on encrypted CDNs, which again are reputable companies. They're just not policing the content that's being uploaded to those sites. And you absolutely need SSL to look inside of that traffic.
And even the bad guys are pretty much loving it, isn't it? I mean, dare I say the bad guys and girls, but they are using encryption to their advantage.
Absolutely. It's a field day for the bad guys. And as you see in this next bullet, a lot of the security infrastructure that's out there on the market, there's a lot of security infrastructure which has got a lot of great security technology built into it. So it's not to say any widget that I'm going to talk about today is necessarily better or worse than any other vendor's widget. But if you're not able to use those controls for encrypted content, you may as well not have the control. And so that's a challenge with traditional firewalls on a lot of traditional devices, whether it's from a sizing and capacity planning, like you mentioned, or just other complexity around enabling it. It's quite challenging. Certificate management is another challenge. Depending on the vendor and how they manage certificates, it's another challenge you've got to be aware of as you're enabling SSL. So, from a solution, what do you need? The biggest thing is you need a solution that can handle all traffic, including encrypted traffic. So that really, this is where it comes down to, and this is a bit techy, but as we said, this is a techie discussion. The best way you're going to get that at scale and to be guaranteed of security is with a proxy architecture that can do a fully enterprise controlled man in the middle. So there are various solutions out there to do this, but that is the best way to do it is something that's leveraging a proxy architecture with that native capability. it's got to be, to your point, SSL can degrade performance all by itself, and it's got to be able to do this without degrading performance. So that's incredibly important, because if performance is degraded, then you wind up in a situation where you then have to go back and turn off that control, which is something we see in a lot of organizations that happens over time. SSL is also a moving target where the industry keeps making the secrets harder to keep up with the computing power. You know, the SSL that we were using and TLS we were using 5 years ago, you know, can actually be relatively easily broken, which is why we've moved on to greater certificates. We've retired older ciphers and protocols to increase that security, but that also increases the processing security. So you need something that can cater to this moving target and scale.
Absolutely, Lee. I think the other key requirement to keep in mind is if it starts to impact performance, the first thing they're going to blame is the new technology or the SD-WAN or whatever. So something to keep in mind that, you know, and I'm sure, again, like I said, I've used Zscaler before myself, but when someone is looking at a solution, they've got to keep in mind that it's got to be seamless rather than add even 5 seconds of delay. That's completely not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of, you know, in terms of our solution, we've got SLAs to guarantee that. So we're building it to cater to all this capability, but then it's an SLA-backed service with the ability to measure against those SLAs. So you should be checking, you know, whichever vendor you're looking at, whether it's Zscaler or some other party, do they have the ability to guarantee the performance? If they say they do they have the ability to demonstrate that they can measure it and show you that they're delivering against those deliverables? So the last big hurdle is just in terms of how you're doing the security management. So SD-WAN is in some ways, you know, an evolution of multi-box management, of multi-router management, but it's creating a mesh, a well-orchestrated mesh of basically smart routers that are cloud connected and cloud managed. As you add security into this mix, you want to make sure you're not adding many different management platforms for many different things. So you've got to look at how is this integrated from an overall management, how are you monitoring your traffic, you know, what, you know, how are you reporting performance and understanding what's going on, both from a performance and traffic as well as a security perspective. Again, trying to do this with traditional appliances when you're dealing with, you know, possibly hundreds of sites is not something that you want to look at as a solution. So what you do want to look for, you want something that can give you a complete picture of all the traffic, that actually shows you, you know, what are the applications users are using, what's the shadow IT, you know, it's something that actually, if you see activity, that you can immediately action that activity, update your policies in real time, and roll out those changes. And you know, this should be ideally a single platform, and that can, you know, and maybe this ties into your SOAR and SOAR strategies, where this is able to integrate with a single platform. You know, this is a solution where I'm not necessarily saying Zscaler is the solution, but the solution needs to be able to integrate with whatever the big visibility platform that you are looking at across everything. And you've got to be able to sort of very easily centrally define and manage and push out in real-time policy changes. So, you know, moving on. So how do you best do that? And this is where we're getting to, you know, the opinion piece from Zscaler. What is the best solution to secure SD-WAN with local breakouts? So Zscaler has built a cloud that in many ways is purpose-built for dealing with all the problems we've just talked about in these previous hurdles. What Zscaler is a cloud solution. It's a cloud security platform that sits in between the users and the applications, so that no matter where the users are, whether they're coming from your traditional networks using something like SD-WAN, or they're coming from a roaming user, what happens is Zscaler becomes the checkpoint where all traffic is routed, Zscaler is providing all of these security controls. So traffic is routed through SD-WAN or endpoint configuration up to the Zscaler cloud. The Zscaler cloud platform is then providing all of these services. So we're providing access control. We're providing, all the basic access controls, but it's not tied to the network necessarily. It's tied to both network and user context, and it can function wherever the user is, whether they're in these locations you've now deployed with SD-WAN or whether they've left the office, they're working from home, they're working from a cafe. It's able to provide that SSL capability at scale, but then with a full suite of threat inspection and prevention capabilities where we're doing not just antivirus, but we're doing IPS, we're doing sandboxing. We're doing data protection around the CASB controls with DLP. We're looking at all the content. So all the content both going out, making sure nothing good is leaking out where it's not supposed to, that where users have read-write access to, that's being managed. But also then making sure that when users are connecting to, the wild, wild west of the internet, that nothing bad is coming in, that we're prioritizing the key SaaS applications like Office 365 with QoS. And then finally, we are integrating back into whatever your central visibility plane is, integrating into your existing SOC or your existing SIM. There's native visibility capabilities within the cloud where you get a lot of user activity reporting and a lot of events that you can see there, but this all integrates seamlessly into your SOC and your SIM as well.
Lee,
Lee,
sorry to interrupt you. One of the things, like I said, I'm very transparent. I've used your product before. And one of the things I really like is the single window view, right? That you get across the different things we've discussed. Yeah. It's not just, I'm going to consolidate my bandwidth, I'm going to save money, but the ability, because one thing to keep in mind for everyone listening in now and later, if you're buying any solution, yes, it may have all the wonderful AI, NG, blah, blah, blah features, but if your end user cannot manage it properly, they cannot operate it quickly and efficiently, and if they have to open 20 dashboards to see one event, it's pointless, right? And it's absolutely crucial is not just look at features, but also look at how easy, and as I've said, I've used the product before, it's refreshing that it must be easy for the operator to operate rather than simply someone to procure something on features. And Zscaler to me, when I am a CISO, I've been a CISO, absolutely delivers on that premise of being easy to operate.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amar, and that's true. That's a good point. And I should probably, my prior to Zscaler, I was with another, another traditional appliance vendor, and the visibility actually and the ability to see what was going on was one of actually the most compelling things when I considered joining Zscaler. That's actually, yeah, it's a big challenge because this, this internet activity, this all of the web transactions and internet transactions that users generate, it generates in tremendous amounts of just raw data in a traditional world. That's just raw log data that then needs to be crunched somewhere. And it's that problem in and of itself is actually so challenging. Many organizations just give up. They've just got servers with logs. When there's an event, you go after the fact and like, okay, well, I just got to crawl through my logs and figure out what happened. But you actually never get real, true visibility of what's going on across the organization. So with this solution, you are getting, just built into the cloud, that real-time view of what's all of the cloud SaaS device activity, whether it's my IoT devices or BYOD or my managed devices, no matter what network they're on. This is all a real-time view you get of all that user activity that just works. And so this is part of being a SaaS solution. There's a lot of pieces that go in there to make sure that things that are actually quite challenging in the old world of appliances just work as part of the service. And so that's a very good point. Thank you, Amar. So to just cover, and today we've talked more around the different security that relates to SD-WAN, but we replace a few different parts of the traditional gateways. So one of the pieces that's very relevant to the SD-WAN discussion is the outbound security stack, the URL filtering, your internet gateway firewall, DLP, the SSL inspection technology you may have there, sandboxing. So all of those pieces are things you would need to be thinking about if you're doing direct breakouts with SD-WAN, and these are all things that are just available as part of the Zscaler service. You don't need boxes for all of these components. The other piece, which is relevant in some ways of discussing like SD-WAN to the endpoint, but this is also more around remote access. So it's not directly tied to an SD-WAN initiative, but as you move applications into Azure and AWS, looking at using the cloud to give zero trust remote access to users, mapping them to individual applications instead of giving them network access. So the Zscaler cloud can actually replace everything related to your outbound internet gateways, which is relevant to the SD-WAN discussion, but can also replace all the things related to remote access, allowing you to move to a zero trust model for remote access. What we're not trying to replace is this third column, which is the infrastructure you may have, the firewall investments, WAF investments, various investments you may have for your data center DMZ. So anything you're advertising out to the public, those are areas of the Zscaler solution, is not participating in. Those are still traditional firewalls and DMZ type security solutions. What Zscaler is trying to be is this layer that sits in the cloud, allows you to adopt these SD-WAN solutions and have Zscaler right there in the middle as you break out, no matter where the user is, whether they're coming from your hub sites, your remote sites using SD-WAN, or they're working from home or from a cafe. Zscaler is that breakout that can secure those users no matter where they're coming from. So to wrap it up, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions. A lot of organizations are turning to SD-WAN to look at how to optimize their network costs, improve user performance, simplify the management of the network. But you've got to think about the security model and how you're doing security as you adopt these SD-WAN initiatives. And using a cloud solution like Zscaler can really not only help you secure your SD-WAN in a really effective way, but also help you accelerate these SD-WAN initiatives to, again, drive your costs down, increase user productivity, and simplify your network and your security. And that's all I have. We'll have a few minutes for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. There's one question. It's an interesting one, and we may have to do a separate webinar for it. Does SSL decrypting break privacy? How do you manage that from Zscaler's point of view?
Yeah, so does it break privacy? In some senses, yes. And so this is definitely where the design of how is it done? How is the privacy maintained even though SSL inspection is being done? So number one, the way Zscaler has designed this is Zscaler as an entity, as a business, Zscaler employees have zero access to any customer data or any control over decisions around customer configuration of what is SSL intercepted and what is not. So, many customers choose to avoid decrypting finance-related websites. At the end of the day, it's not about Zscaler having access to that data, but as the administrator of the Zscaler tenant, using DLP rules, potentially an administrator could potentially get access to that. Zscaler as a company has no access, and everything is always in RAM. Zscaler never writes any of this content to disk. This is all managed under our ISO controls and our ISO audits of how Zscaler has access, what access Zscaler employees, support and operations have. So everything's in memory. Zscaler has no access. We've even gone to the degree that, when we do, the one scenario where we do write content to disk is a core dump. So we are based on software, and just like any other company that has software that runs on a device, you may need to look at the memory. And so we, in rare cases, our engineers may require a core dump from a device to debug what was wrong. But our core dump code actually doesn't write SSL payloads. So that's actually, one of the key things as we built that code out, that we're always looking at those sensitive payloads. Our ISO auditors have audited this. So Zscaler has gone to great lengths to guarantee that customers have full control over privacy. Now, customer enterprise administrators do have your own controls. So if you did decide to use DLP to extract data, that's technically possible, but this is where, the enterprises are in control. You should be working with your own compliance teams to make sure you're managing privacy internally. And you can certainly avoid encrypting any sites where privacy is a concern, like financial sites.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. So you give the platform, it's up to the organization to ensure that they are doing the right thing. If they want to retain the data, they retain it for as long as their policy and their compliance with the local GDPR or equivalent regulations. This has been very useful. It's been to the point. We could spend a lot of time on the technical elements and etc. But I think that was a very good question. There were one or two other questions. I think let's take the final one and then maybe wrap it up. Can someone bypass the Zscaler configuration on the laptop as the example? Am I making sense?
Yeah. So in terms of bypassing from the laptop, it would be challenging. So in terms of when you're talking about we're going back to this SD-WAN discussion. With SD-WAN, we're deploying Zscaler independent of the device configuration. So when the user's on the network, there is zero way that can be bypassed when you're doing an SD-WAN deployment that's transparently forwarding traffic to Zscaler. Now, when you're talking about a user who has left the office, but you still want to forward that traffic to Zscaler, generally speaking, the answer is no. So we have an agent that you deploy to the endpoint. That agent has built-in tamper-proofing, and it's managed by IT, whether users have the ability to disable or enable that agent. And that's controlled by IT.
It's a lease configuration. It's not your headache, I guess. It's how IT and security configures the laptop to disable meddling with the configuration.
Correct, but we support that tamper-proofing, yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I think there are no further questions. Like I said, we could do a deep dive on the configuration in the next one, but it's been very useful. If there are no other questions, which there aren't, to the audience, please leave feedback. Lee, any final comments? Because I think I've made my point in terms of, to me, it's not just consolidation, it's about as ease of operation, very important, and the ability to, dare I say, replace a majority of the traditional firewall infrastructure. Final comments?
I think that's a very good wrap up. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
Excellent. Thank you for the time, Lee, and hope to speak to you again.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.